Earlier this week, New York Senator Chuck Schumer called for a crackdown on what he calls academic doping. That's the misuse of Adderall and other ADHD and ADD drugs as cognitive enhancers or study drugs, and it's happening on campuses across the U.S. and Canada. In the U.S., between 15 and 35% of students use prescription stimulants to study, even though they don't have a formal diagnosis. In Canada, the numbers aren't as clear, although a study recently cited in the Canadian Medical Association journal puts the prevalence as high as 11%. And the vast majority of those students get those drugs through dealers, fellow students or friends, like our first guest. We're calling him Jay, which is not his real name. Jay was worried he would suffer legal and personal consequences if his identity was revealed. He was diagnosed with ADHD 8 years ago and has been taking various medications ever since. For a period of time, he sold his extra pills illegally to mature students and professionals in Toronto. He joined me in studio. Hi, Jay.
Hi.
How long did you sell these pills for, and who did you sell them to?
Probably sold them for around 2-3 years, and I sold them to friends and acquaintances and sometimes people who were friends of friends.
And were most of these people students or doing some kind of academic work?
All of them were students.
So what kind of students were you talking to, or were you selling them to?
Undergraduate political studies, a lot of graduate students, PhD and masters.
Any particular age range? Were they generally young people?
Mostly early 20s to, I'd say, early 40s.
And what was the price? What were you selling the pills for?
I wasn't making money off of it. I was just getting my money back, and people were just asking, and I was okay with giving it to them.
So a dose would cost then how much?
I would just usually give it for $1 a pill, which was basically what I was paying for it.
And give us a sense of the appetite for these drugs on university campuses. How much demand was there?
I mean, these are people I know. A lot of people were interested in taking them. And that was, I mean, they were in situations where they had a paper to do, and that was an option. And they weren't getting it done at the time, and they just asked for the pills, and I gave it to them.
Do you think there's a sense of secrecy? Do you think there's a stigma around using drugs like these?
I think there was still a stigma. No one really cared. Like, I'm sure they told other people, and it was an open discussion. I don't think people really looked into the issues when they were doing it. And yeah, there wasn't too much of there wasn't a stigma.
But you looked into the issues because you had a legitimate prescription for these drugs. You needed these drugs to deal with your ADHD.
Yes, I did.
So how did you come to have a surplus to sell?
You take it as needed. So there was times where I didn't take it. Like I would have maybe 30 in a month, and then maybe I'd only take 10 because it was only when I actually did the work. And having ADD, sometimes it's difficult just to take the pill. Mm-hmm. Like you're procrastinating doing the work. So to do the work, you first have to take the pill so you can procrastinate actually taking the pill to do the work. So there would be a surplus. I would always have extra pills around.
How did you feel about the fact that the people that were purchasing these pills from you mm-hmm. didn't have a full picture of what the implication of the use of this pharmaceutical was, because they weren't under the care of a psychiatrist like you?
Looking back, I don't feel okay about it. Luckily, no one was harmed, and I'm very happy for that. I should have been more careful, and I don't feel great about it. I wouldn't do it again. And I did have a negative experience selling drugs where I told the person specifically, do not abuse them. And this is a graduate student. He was doing it to finish his master's, and he ended up abusing them, and he had a reaction. He, from what I was told, he turned green and had some contusions because he abused it. So,
is that what made you stop selling them?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what you were doing was illegal. Did it weigh on your conscience?
I don't think it did, because the majority of the drugs were to my friends, and I was just taking the money back. With that situation specifically, this person was an acquaintance. Mm-hmm. Sorry, no, it was more a friend of a friend. And in that situation, yeah, after that, it was just like, this isn't good. But I would trust, all my friends not to do what he did. And I was very upset. I never talked to the person again.
Okay, final question. Do you think that adults who do not need these drugs medically, but are looking for neuroenhancers, should be able to buy them legally?
I don't believe they should buy them legally. I think after all of this, after my experience, they should not be able to do it. They should go in for a consultation. If they believe they have problems with concentrating, with attention, with procrastination, they should see a doctor, and the doctor should assess it. And also, the most important thing is that natural remedies are tried before the medication is given. And there's also an issue of education to teach people how to study properly and how to get their work done in a proper manner.
Jay, thank you for coming in.
No problem.
That was Jay in Toronto. He asked us not to reveal his identity because of his fear of consequences. He used to sell his ADHD meds illegally. Our next guest is Dr. Derryck Smith, a clinical professor emeritus at the University of British Columbia's Department of Psychiatry. He is also a practicing psychiatrist, and he treats and prescribes drugs for people with ADHD and other cognitive issues. Unlike a lot of other medical professionals, he thinks there's nothing wrong with students using these drugs to study. Good morning, Dr. Smith.
Good morning.
We just heard Jay's story about selling drugs on campus. Do you think students should have to break the law to take these drugs if they want to take them for academic reasons?
Well, I'm not certain that they have to break the law. I'm not certain whether selling your prescription drugs is breaking the law or not. I think it's bad medical practice, and I wouldn't condone that. But I think that people can buy these cognitive-enhancing medications online. They don't have to buy them from their friends. And I see no reason why in select situations they could not have them prescribed by their doctors.
Well, what about you? As a practicing psychiatrist, would you have ethical problems prescribing these pills to people who don't need them medically?
Well, I don't know what you mean by needing them medically. I think cognitive enhancement is, a bona fide reason for prescribing medication. And the American Academy of Neurology, which I think is the only organization which has addressed this issue, has stated that it is ethical to prescribe these medications for that purpose. So I'm not certain that in the absence of any guidance from licensing authorities or the Canadian Medical Association or the Canadian Psychiatric Association, I'm not aware of any other ethical positions on this issue.
Have you prescribed these drugs to people who want to take them for academic reasons?
On rare occasion, I have, yes.
So the paper that you cited from the American Academy of Neurology has been criticized, though, and I'm thinking of Eric Racine, who is a neuroethicist at McGill University, and he says that there have been no large-scale randomized clinical trials on the safety of neuroenhancers. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't know. Every ethicist is going to have an opinion on this matter, and quite frequently the ethicist will end up on different sides of the position. But I don't think that you can criticize an ethical position paper on the fact that there's been no clinical trials done. In actual fact, there's never going to be any clinical trials done because the manufacturers of these products do not want to get involved in any way, shape, or form with having their medications prescribed for cognitive enhancement.
So, and that's a liability issue then?
Well, it's just too controversial. They don't want to get involved with this issue. I think people are aware that there's diversion going on, particularly on campuses. But I will predict that we're not going to see any big time multi-center trials on the use of these medications. What we're likely to see are small reports, and indeed there are a number of reports that I'm aware of in the literature that have shown that these medications are efficacious.
Let me read you part of the Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse. They have some official information on this. They say ADHD drugs are stimulants which may be abused by people looking for a sense of euphoria. And then they go on to list some risks, which include faster irregular heartbeat, reduced appetite, heart failure, nervousness, insomnia, and addiction. Do you think they're wrong?
No, I think this is exactly why I suggest that if people are going to be taking these medications, they should be prescribed by their doctors so that they can have medical monitoring of their response to the medication. That strengthens my position that these should be prescribed under the supervision of their regular family doctor. And that little snippet you just read me talks about using these for abuse. Now, I'm not talking about them in an abuse position.
Mm-hmm.
If these medications are taken in large doses, they can produce a sense of euphoria, very much the way you would get with using the street drug speed. I'm not talking about that use at all. I'm talking about using them in moderate doses for neuro enhancement, which is different than using them recreationally.
Pressure is mounting for universities in Canada to have an official position on the so-called study drugs. What do you think they should do?
Well, I don't know. If they had a position, that would make everything a lot clearer. I think my prediction is that they will never come up with a unified position on that because it's an area of great controversy. If they do, then that may change the playing field altogether. For example, in competitive sports, you cannot use steroids because those are the official rules, and if you break the rules, then you're disqualified. I'm unaware of any campus in North America that has a policy on using cognitive enhancing medication.
I believe some American universities have a policy that forbids it.
That's if they do, that's news to me. Which universities have that policy?
Duke University.
Okay, you may be right. It's news to me. However, I think we should keep in mind that the biggest cognitive enhancer on campus and in cities across North America is coffee.
So you think that caffeine is analogous to these prescribed medications?
I do. They're both neurostimulant medications. Caffeine and all of the medications for ADHD are neurostimulants by classification, and coffee is simply another neurostimulant, which is why it is so popular.
You're a doctor. That's a high-performance, high-stress profession. Do you think people in your field self-prescribe neuroenhancers?
I don't. I'm not aware of people doing that. I'm aware that neuroscientists, in fact, I went to a meeting in Hong Kong, and we conducted a poll of neuroscientists. These are people who are conducting research into schizophrenia, bipolar depression. A good percentage of them, more than 20, had used neuroenhancers over the past year, primarily to deal with staying up all night writing research reports or dealing with jet lag because they're going to conferences all over the world. So I think that there is certainly some evidence that people who understand how the brain works have no trouble with using these medications in selected situations.
Dr. Smith, it was great to talk to you. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure, Brent.
Dr. Derryck Smith, a psychiatrist and professor at UBC. This is Day 6. Day 6. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. We're at CBC Day 6.